Welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters.
To talk about different things around diversity, equity, inclusion, talk about things that people may find challenges with, so we hope you find them really useful. Some are around people's different lived experiences, some really challenging conversation, things that sometimes we don't need to talk about. But we really hope you enjoy the range of topics that we are introducing to you or bringing to you, to your homes, to your house, your workplaces.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters. My name is Tasha. I'll be hosting the session today. I am the founder and director of Diverse Matters, and I've got a wonderful guest with us, Mark Wilson, who will find out a little bit more about him shortly. But today's topic is something that has really been on my mind a lot lately. We're in a very interesting climate with wars, with misinformation, with a lot of negativity, a lot of discrimination of people who are often marginalised in very difficult situations. Hence, this podcast is called Compassion in a Hostile Climate. I thought it was really useful to talk about this today because, as Mark and I will talk about, there's so much information out there that people don't fully understand. There's so much without using a certain person's phrase, false news, fake news as they call it. And sadly, people then buy into that fake news and misinformation, which we'll talk about. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll be, for those of you who don't know enough, it will be enhance your knowledge. For others, it might help you wonder or question what your original thoughts were. So over to Mark. So Mark, I know you've done a lot of this work of dealing with a whole range of things from prevent to asylum seekers, refugees. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and your background.
Oh, that's a hell of an intro. Thanks, Tash. So I started off as an archaeologist. I did that for about 4.5 years. And if you pardon the pun, it was a career in ruins. I didn't like doing it in the winter. It was quite cold. I moved forward after that and spent about 9 months doing support work with people with mental health issues. And then I moved into the kind of arena of retail and spent 7 years as a store manager for Blockbuster Video. Those glory days. Yeah, absolutely. And then I moved on to working for Leicestershire Police, where I became a witness care advisor, and I supported people through the Crown Court process, many of those that were bereaved by homicide or rape victims. And so it's quite a strong job. Then in 2009, I was really lucky to be poached and headhunted by Victim Support and spent 7 lovely years working in victim support in the East Midlands in Leicester, where I became a bit of a lead on hate crime and equality in diversity. And then in 2015, I joined Leicestershire County Council, where I became a Prevent Education Officer. And I've spent the last kind of 10 or so years rattling around the Midlands, doing work around hate crime, community cohesion, and extremism.
Lovely. And that's what we met back in the days of victim support. Mark and I, and we both used to do a lot of work around hate crime, about inclusion. So who else best to bring today to talk about this? So I'm going to get straight into it and talk about some of these myths that are often out there and various people fighting on mainstream, even television myths. So for those people out there, and Diverse Matter, all about facts, people, about what really is the deal. What do you think have you found the most common myths about asylum seekers and refugees?
Oh, the most common one is that they come here and they take all our resources and that they swindle us out of taxpayers' money. It's really interesting because the reality is that isn't the case. In 2023, 2024, the asylum system costs about £5.5 billion. What's interesting when you look at that is that the reports and the data suggests that each asylum seeker potentially gives back to the UK economy about £265,000 as well per person.
Wow.
I think there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation around that. And I think also there's one of the big ones that I think is really interesting is that asylum seekers are prohibited from working. So a lot of people think they should come here, get a job, and actually they're not allowed to. It's a really difficult kind of situation for them. I think there's a few areas in the country now where asylum seekers can actually work, but only after being an asylum seeker for a certain amount of time. I think it's about 12 or 18 months, and then they're allowed to go into that kind of area of work. I think a lot of people also think that asylum seekers get lots of money, and they don't. The average is about £50 a week, and if they're in a hotel, they only get about £9 a week. Now, we know that a Starbucks nowadays costs about £5.50.
Exactly.
So that's really not a huge amount for them to live on. By comparison, the state pension is approximately around £220 a week. So there's a significant cost of living difference for what an asylum seeker gets versus a UK resident.
Yeah, and also people aren't put up in your top hotels, people are put in the bare middle, the hotels that are available, they're not high end. And that's what people need to realise. People who would want to live in a hotel for how long? It may seem like a great thing, but actually you've got no settlement, you've got no stability. But people will go, oh, great. But so yeah, thanks for that. And £9, I was saying that just about, how much is a Happy Meal? £5? When you think about it, it's just, as you said, Starbucks these days, the coffee and drink place are available. You get very little change from that. Very little change.
We've just, we always talk about the meal deal, don't we? The average meal deal is just under £4 now. So that'd be 2 meal deals a week you would be able to potentially just about live on if you weren't subsidised. I think for me as well, the whole issue about hotel accommodation, yes, in some parts of the country, there might have been slightly better hotels than others. But a lot of the hotels that I've seen around the country are not the kind of places that I'd want to go to for a short break. Yeah. I would describe them as potentially 1 star in terms of review status. And also to think that sometimes in those hotel rooms, you've got a whole family, mum, potentially dad, children, and that's not good for anybody in that environment. We've seen from public health kind of perspectives that there's absolutely massive rises in illnesses, public health diseases that are concerning because people are cooped up in these tiny little hotel rooms.
Exactly. Thank you. What about, you've mentioned the sort of figures in terms of what asylum seekers, asylum give back to us. Anything else about numbers and other economic impacts? Or
yeah, I think that one of the most significant things, and there's a lot of disinformation about the millions of people that come into the UK in asylum. I think it's important to look at the year and the data that I saw that to June 2025, there are only about 200,000 people that came to the UK versus about 650,000 the year before. This does follow a peak record of just under 1 million in March 2023. And there are lots of kind of trends that are important in this as well. I think a lot of non-EU residents remain the only group with positive net migration, and that's also down from previous years. And also EU and British, both groups saw more people leaving than arriving, with net migration at minus 70,000 for EU nationals and minus 109,000 for British nationals. So we know that it's not just a migration we're also migrating out of the country.
Exactly.
As well. And that doesn't often get talked about. If you go to certain parts of Spain, for example, it's a very British identity attached to it, doesn't it?
Definitely. And it's like when we go abroad, we're expats. But when other people come here, they're asylum seekers or refugees. But actually, the British people, we are far and wide. But it's the explanation or the language is completely different into how people are described when they go to live in other countries and migrate to other places.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to recognise that the OBR, the Office of British, I can't remember what it's called now, the Office of blah, 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 estimates that high net migration generally reduces government borrowing and debt because typically the people that come here are of working age as well. For the 2028-29 period, an additional 350 migrants are projected to increase general tax revenue by £6.2 billion.
Wow.
Now, we wouldn't be able to do that as a nation by ourselves. We are a nation with declining birth rates, older age populations. Let's be clear here. We absolutely need migration.
100%.
Of course, it needs to be managed like everything needs to be managed to make sure you've got appropriate services, facilities, housing, NHS, all those kind of things. But it is not a negative.
Yeah. And it's about fairness, isn't it? Because this whole negative rhetoric about, which you've clearly stated is not the case in terms of financials. It's to say that Britain, we have people who are on benefits who's then often being reviewed because it's not always done fairly or whatever. So it's the different side of it, isn't it? Different perspectives, like British people. I'm sure a lot of people have lots of benefits that they absolutely deserve and should have. But sometimes that's not the case either. So it's this whole one-sidedness that's a fail.
Yeah, I think this kind of perception that the UK is overrun with massive immigration or with flooded with refugees compared to other nations. The reality is only about 1% of the world's population is in the UK. In 2025, the UK received roughly 110,000 asylum seeker claims, far fewer than Germany, which was 250,000, or France, which had 160,000. There's also this concern that the UK is overpopulated.
We're way down the list, aren't we? Way down.
And that's a reality. And actually, we don't have land issues like people may believe. We have a lot of brown belt land and grey belt land that can be used. And actually only, so the southern half of the country really is populated quite densely, but a lot of the country isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we've both alluded to already this question around language. The whole thing around illegal versus legal, flood, crisis. the whole thing, the propaganda around this as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I think labelling somebody as illegal rather than their action as being unauthorized, it suggests that the very existence that they're here is a crime, and that isn't the reality.
Yeah.
It strips away their victim status, someone that's fleeing danger, and it replaces it with their perpetrator status, which actually creates a them versus divide and resentment within our communities. Psychologically, we feel that criminals do not deserve, and therefore that fuels this narrative of us versus them. You then get the kind of language like flood, wave, or swamp, the national disaster kind of metaphors that are quite useful sometimes, but actually these are liquid metaphors. They compare people to an unstoppable, destructive force of nature. And people have this misconception of there's a loss of control, a loss of kind of governance. It removes the humanity of the individuals as well, which I think is really important here. Every person that is in this country is a human being first and foremost. And this kind of rhetoric that is used removes that from them. And then move on to the crisis state, suggests that the system is falling down and requires extreme, often undemocratic measures to fix. People are more willing to accept tough politics, and we've seen that with the rise of certain political groups and their agendas toward, I wouldn't go as far as saying rights leaning, I'd go a far right kind of leaning and perspective. It creates a sense of urgency and moral panic within communities. And again, it causes those issues in our communities where they become concerned, vulnerable, and they become fearful, and then they start to retaliate in ways that don't help absolutely anybody in our communities.
Definitely said. Yeah. Like I said, with all this misinformation and negative rhetoric, I sometimes think get back to the basics, because some people do not understand the difference between an asylum seeker and refugee. Can you do that for us? And also white matters type of thing that'd be useful for the listeners or the watchers.
So an asylum seeker, as I understand it, is a person who's left their home country to seek protection from another or persecution from serious harm, has made a formal application for asylum in another country. They are considered an asylum seeker whilst their claim is pending a decision from the government. Refugee is a person whose asylum claim has been formally accepted according to the 1951 Refugee Convention. As a refugee is someone who cannot return to their country due to an ongoing fear of being persecuted based on race, religion, sexuality, nationality, political opinion, etc., or part of a specific social group.
Lovely, thank you. So it's useful to clarify. But often both still very much in need, very much requiring safety, and in pretty much in all cases coming through the right reasons. Again, some people have just got that negative, they're all coming for the not wrong reason, but often people are in fear for life. And like I say, particularly now, where all the things that are going on, the wars, the unsafe situations that happen globally, we need to recognise that really.
And I think it's also really, sorry Tash, to cut you off there. I think it's really important. I think it's really important to acknowledge it's not illegal to enter a country for the purpose of seeking protection. The refugee label provides a shield of permanent or long-term protection, whereas the asylum seeker label indicates a period of legal and financial limbo. And I think we need to remember that. I don't think any person would get into a boat in France or Germany.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
You've got 20-foot high waves. You're in a boat that's not suitable for marine craft. And you're quite often taking children with you. And yes, there is a weighting of more males and females and children that come to the UK. I certainly would never, ever get on a boat to travel to a different country under those kind of circumstances. And then be in debt bondage for 10, maybe 15 years as well. And then there's the domestic servitude, the human slavery kind of aspects that kind of filter into the back of that as well, when you're paying the gangs that actually bring people over. I don't think nobody chooses to do that lightly, do they?
It's a life or death situation. When I see it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd run as people that probably be in danger, because I couldn't risk that and everybody's got their own journey, but on a personal level, I'm sure it's not a decision that anybody takes lightly or very easily. And like you say, it's costly as well. So they've saved how much money for that. And it's so many components to that, which people don't always understand really.
I'm a parent of two children. I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. And the thought of being in a position where I would have to bundle them into a boat that I know isn't safe, onto waters without enough life jackets, without any food, without any protection from the weather, potentially facing 25-foot high waves in one of the busiest marine shipping channels in the world. Nobody does that lightly, do they?
Exactly. And this is what people need to think through, rather than people, and I've discovered, and we talked about this right at the beginning, that people take the headline or take the bait of what the misinformation said and go with that. Again, if you what sometimes I need to do a little social media detox, but I'll see where people are being interviewed, and when they're asked about whether it's asylum seekers, refugees, discrimination, whatever it is, they're only basing it on one or two lines of information, which often are not correct. And they haven't always sought information to go, oh, actually, that's not quite right. Let me check that out. And that is a lot of the problem that they're understanding is, as we know, if people have not experienced that different lived experience, it's hard for some people. If you're somebody who hasn't ever faced much discrimination or any significant challenges, but you get that in your head, you're probably thinking, oh, it's all this different nonsense. It's always about A, B, C, or D. Because if you're not walking in those shoes, how, then you're not having an understanding of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think language is really quite important. And the way that we dehumanize asylum seekers and refugees by calling them objects or animals, or we use a psychological buffer to push them away, because it's much easier to do that than it is to call them a parent, a former GP, former nurse. It's easier to hold people at arm's length and then actually they're not be psychologically affected by the fact that you've just witnessed a potential father lose his life whilst trying to save himself and his children from a war-torn country. Yeah, words really matter. And I think the disinformation and misinformation that circulates online is really problematic as well.
Definitely. It sort of links into just giving people a bit of an overview around hate crime, because that's something you've done in many years, and I did it many years ago, not recently. Because obviously, so much hate crime, sadly, for people from underrepresented communities, and I know the figures vary in terms of numbers, but if you could tell people what is actually classed as hate crime.
Okay, so in the UK, we define a hate crime as any criminal offence perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a specific person's characteristics. However, it is important to note that as of this month, so March 2026, the legal framework is undergoing a significant change to equalise how different types of hate are treated under the law. Now, we have 5 what we call protected characteristics that are the bedrock of hate crime legislation. So the first one is race, which includes nationality, ethnicity, and national origin. And then you've got religion or belief, including a lack of religious belief. Then you've got sexual orientation, transgender identity, and disability, which includes things like physical, mental, or learning disabilities as well.
Lovely, thank you. And what, how would you say, what have the figures been like over the last 2 years? Have they gone up? They've gone down? And bearing in mind, going up can mean actually more people are reporting it as well. But what the figures are telling us?
Yeah, it's not good. I think one of the things that we've noticed is that there's been quite a significant split, which fits into the anti-migration narrative, which the rise in racial and religious hate crimes has increased, whilst offences related to sexual orientation, disability, and transgender identity have actually saw declines. What we've seen is that race crimes have grown by 6% over the last year, reaching just about 83,000 hate crimes. And religious hate crimes have received their highest annual ever total, increasing by 3% overall. There's been a significant anti-Muslim surge of around 19%, with a sharp spike following the 2024 Southport atrocity where 3 young girls were killed. Anti-Semitism has seen a massive 113% increase compared to the previous year, linked to the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict. And Jewish people still experience the highest rate of religious hate crime per 10,000 population of the UK.
Wow. And again, this all links, doesn't it? All the things that happen in society is mirrored in those figures, like you're saying, because like this, all you need to do is go on social media, again, like I said, and the anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Black, oh my gosh, all the marches we've had that over the last sort of recent year or two, and what that brings people. And I've even noticed that I'd say a couple of years ago, or maybe pre-COVID, that people were aware of what they could say and what they couldn't say in terms of whether it was racist, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic, and all the rest of that. And people would probably not say, but I think people now believe, because of quite well-known people speaking out, that it's okay. And I can't believe how much I have seen walking about. I live in an area where not just by me, but not too far away, lots of flags. I was walking to the shop the other day and then I saw the N word written on a lamppost. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I? 70s. And it is, and it's very much, people feel it's okay now, whereas before there was a little bit of, no, that's not okay. It's like people have got a mission now.
I think, unfortunately, the UK has a very rich history in covert racism and hate crimes in general. The unfortunate thing is it's no longer covert. I guess it's more fortunate in the sense that we actually see it and hear it. For me, problematically, it's become extremely normalised. And I think we have to look
100%.
primarily at like online social media platforms that are driving algorithmic hate. And what we know is that people that access online content, there's something in our brains that winds us up to hateful and extreme content. And we're 7 times more likely to follow a fake news story or something that's hateful or extreme than a positive news story. So it's really hard to counter that narrative. So if you think about Southport, there was lots of things about him being a Rwandan refugee and he'd recently reverted to Islam and all those things. And none of those were actually true. But that horse bolted and there was no way that disinformation and misinformation could be fact checked and brought back into the stable, which means that we see huge spikes in our communities. I've worked in this arena for a long time now, and to see the impact on people in 2026 of things that I never believed I would ever see in my lifetime is absolutely catastrophic. I think is a person that like values diversity and inclusion, to see where we are in 2026, the removal of transgender rights, for example.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, the hounding of people that are disabled, forcing them to return to work when they may not be able to do so for medical reasons, all these kind of things, I think it is really dystopian in terms of where we are. And then all of that is fueled through this hateful language and narrative that is sitting in these online spaces.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. And also the fact is, like you said, for trans people, disabled people, many marginal communities, I don't think there's any communities from marginal who have had challenges that isn't facing challenge right now. It's just all exacerbated, isn't it, by over these last couple of years. I was going to say something, it's gone now. Go on, Mark.
Yeah, just look at like autism and how like the whole debate in the United States of America, about autism being a condition that's related to Tylenol, and the impact that had on the parents at the first stage and the impact that has now had on people that are autistic or neurodiverse. It's been absolutely shockingly incredible. And as a father of someone that's got an autistic child, this is really unhelpful rhetoric and narrative. How it's made what was already a difficult fight to get access to services, provision, education resources, even more complicated and difficult.
100%. And just think of those. My question to you was going to be, why are they underreported? But I think we know, you can add it as well. But the fact is, some people from particularly asylum seekers, refugees, do they know where to report? Do they think they'll be believed? They might think, actually, I can't go to the police because I'm not seen as a trusted person by the police. Those figures you've shown are awful, they've gone higher, but I'm sure they're even higher than that in real terms.
I think, based on my own kind of work that I've done, I believe that probably only about 1 to 5% of all hate crimes are actually reported. I think some are reported more than that, like racial and religious are, but there's a huge underreporting. I know that the government's own data suggests, I think it was in 2024, that something like 40 or 50% of the LGBT plus community would not report a hate crime. That's almost 1 in 2 people wouldn't report it. And then you think about our minority communities, those that are seeking asylum, refugee, or settler status, may be fearful of going to the police to report a hate crime, because if they report it, there's a fear that they may never get out of the police station, because in their home countries, the police forces operate without impunity, and that causes significant concern as well. And actually then, when you start to look at our people that are learning disabled, the fear and hostility that they face means that they're never likely to report it. So yes, I think it is massively underreported, but also I think there's a massive lack of faith in the justice system. I think punitive kind of responses to those that commit hate crimes are not as serious as they should be. And I think that all of these things create this incubator where people just don't feel like they can be comfortable to report that kind of content in.
And I'm glad you raised, I remember years ago when we were with the victim support and we were doing stuff on hate crime and the whole thing around we've gone back to that. I remember we did a campaign about how disability, hate crime or disabled people were often seen in that negative light in terms of the whole support and benefit. And like you said, learning disability, Are people supported to actually so they can actually report if they need to and all that type of thing? And the same that you said, LGBT, we used to do it back in the day, didn't we? Because sometimes people might not want to share that because they might think, the police homophobic or the police biphobic, transphobic, because sadly, a lot of the police forces the reports have been in research, the evidence shows them. And I'm not going to, be slate all police because there's lots of fabulous police out there. But there are people are thinking twice, 3 times before they go, you know what? Am I going to actually do this? Is it worth my time?
And I think that there are larger societal implications here as well. There's the impact on mental health, well-being, financial implications. If it's children in school, do they have to move schools? What kind of adverse childhood experiences do they suffer with? We've got an NHS that isn't able to cope with the increase in mental health since COVID. We've got all of these kind of things. And as a parent or as a person that's suffering it, you make a judgment, don't you?
Yeah.
What is the benefit of me reporting this? Will it make things better? Actually, it potentially may not. And there's one of our massive failings in society, I feel.
It's the whole process that you've got to go through as well with it. We would urge people to, because we want people
100%.
to be brought to justice. That's
100%.
what we are, bottom line. But we understand why, because it's not straightforward. I'm reporting. It's fear. It could be safety. They might feel they're not safe, depending on all those type of things, which we know. But even more broader, I said, it's the whole world at the moment, as I've said a million times. And I would say I'm quite a confident person, quite. But even myself, I would say mental, psychological, mental health and well-being. And I often will go to organisations, they'll say, have you been checking on your staff with all the things, the sort of misinformation, more of the far right coming out, more of the marches? So have you been checking in on your teams? Have you been saying, are you okay? Because with the marches, some people might not want to go on in public transport. And I know myself that I've been feeling, I will think twice about going certain place and doing certain things now. So what people don't need to realise is that when we're in this hostile climate, the whole psychological, like you said, mental health and well-being impacts as well.
Yeah, we're seeing huge rises of like clinical depression, social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder in adults. We've seen a huge rise in suicide and suicide ideation in young people as well, experienced online cyberbullying. Quite often it's linked to racism or religious kind of backgrounds. Victims quite often report psychological impacts such as flashbacks, also physical impacts such as heart
generational trauma and all that.
Yeah. And evidence is now showing that if you live in a trauma response kind of state, that actually affects your DNA and you pass that on to your children. So that there are huge implications for this. And I think we have to do better as a society. I don't know what all the answers are because I don't think there is generally an appetite within a lot of our communities to do anything about this right here, right now, because the country is so polarized and so focused on immigration and migration and this them versus us othering that it's not an impossible task, but it's a hell of an uphill task. And I don't know how we respond to that in a way. I think partly our governments have a part to play in this. I think the police potentially looking at removing third-party reporting processes around the country. I don't know if you saw that recently. The National Chief Police, the National Chief Police Council's currently doing a review of third-party reporting centres.
Wow.
Now, me personally, I have an issue with the terminology of a third-party reporting centre because it doesn't really represent what it actually does. So I would use a terminology like a hate incident reporting centre. It does what it says on the tin kind of thing. But so there's a lot of things going on around the country. And again, for those people that don't want to go to a police station, they want to report it online, the national third-party reporting mechanism is something called True Vision that actually, when you drill down into it, it's a police mechanism. So again, people will not use that. So it becomes another barrier in terms of people reporting in as well.
Yeah, and when you said that, and I'm saying, oh, wow, with the knowledge that we used to work and do work around third-party reporting. And I remember at the time, this is 20 years, 15 years ago, I think one of the issues, I hope they do not get rid of them, but I think one of the issues is there's a lot of people don't know enough about them and how they go. There could be a bit more promotion about what is, like you said, might be the terminology of it, but actually a lot of people don't promote. We are here if you're going to report a hate crime and you don't want to go to the police. So I think rather than say we're not going to have them, look at what's not working and improve that, because I think that's part of it. More of, if you knew you could go down to your local community centre and report and rather than the police. I know absolutely loads of people that would rather that, probably including myself, to go to if you've got your own. And I think that's what it is. And I think a lot of third-party reporting centres in my day, when I was doing work around that, weren't often supported, weren't checked in with what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
And so there were just less. So some people were doing it really well, and some people less so because the whole process was not done properly. And I remember True Vision, always bringing back memories about True Vision. I remember a lot of that. And it is. So I think that's probably what the part to play is. But if anybody's out there who is the current third-party reporting centre, please promote, let your communities know there, and that you can take that report in and that gets dealt with, because the reporting centres are critical. But I do think it may be how they're promoted, how people are spoken about them. I don't think there's enough awareness of what they are actually and what they do.
No, I think you're right. And there are some national ones that you can tap into as well. So for the Jewish community, you've got the Community Securities Trust. For the Muslim community, you've got the British Muslim Trust.
Yeah.
And then you've got, I think, Gallup for the LGBT community. And then obviously you've got Stop Hate UK. So there are lots of different agencies out there. And I would absolutely implore anybody that is a victim of hate or hostility to report it in. Now, I think it's also important to touch on the fact that a lot of things that I perceive to be a hate crime aren't even reportable as hate crimes. So misogyny, for example, isn't even treated as such at the moment. And only as recently as 2025 did it go to government, and they again decided not to make misogyny or misandry hate crimes. And I think that is really detrimental. I also think that we need to look at alternative subcultures. So people like goths and emos.
Yeah.
We need to look at that. And actually also homeless people, because I know that homeless people are specifically attacked because they're homeless. So they're a targeted individual, aren't they, in their own right? But again, I don't think we're anywhere near that kind of area of kind of responsibility societally at the moment.
Yeah. Now, you just said a term I don't think I know. Misandry.
It's the male version of misogyny.
Huh? Thank you.
Yeah.
I've learned something today.
Yeah, I believe in equality. So, anybody and everybody can be a victim of hate and hostility, whether that's male or females. And we have to look at that, and also look at how that interplays with like transgender identity and status as well. So there's a lot in this. So I was pretty appalled to see that it didn't actually make it through. In some of the areas where I've worked, they have started to adopt misogyny and misandry and alternative subcultures, but it's a long and slow, painful process. And I think there are only 4 or 5 police forces around the country that actually report misogyny as well.
Wow.
44 police force areas. That kind of says a lot.
Yeah, and I think I haven't seen it yet, but I've been hearing all about Louis Theroux's Manosphere, and I need to have a look at that, because I think that was misogyny personified, but I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen it?
I watched it on Saturday evening, Tash, and it is it's catastrophic. What comes across in there is that you get lots of men that are struggling with mental well-being, have come from families that have broken down for whatever reason, parents, all those kind of things that have led to this vacuum where these young men and boys have become indoctrinated into a viewpoint that crosses over with white supremacism as well. So most of this can be extremely white supremacist as well. And you start to see a rise in women being treated as commodities rather than human beings. They talk about the sexual market value of men, the SMV, and how a men's SMV has to go up for him to be perceived to be worthy or something. A person with a low SMV, for example, would be an incel, involuntary celibate. And there's a lot in there, and it plays on young people's mental health. And again, just to bring this back to social media companies, I did a bit of a test last year where I created a brand new Instagram account on a machine that had never had Instagram on it before. And within 30 minutes, it was pushing misogynistic content at me.
Wow.
Without me even looking for it. And the thing is, once you watch one of those videos, it then suggests another 3, then 7, then 15. And quite quickly, you're stuck in that algorithm, or that echo chamber, as we used to call it, and you're just eating that reinforced content.
Wow. And both of us, I know you do a lot in schools as well, we talk about misogyny, and I won't mention certain people's names. When I have done that in schools, I must stop saying I'm shocked and stunned, but the amount of young people who idolize those misogynistic, high-profile people is shocking to me. And like you said, the algorithm is, wow, yeah, they're really good. They're a bit this over this. I'm like, do you know what they do? Do you know how they make them? And it's shocking.
Yes, and I think it's important to note that there is an interplay here with COVID, I believe. So for a lot of our young boys and men during lockdown, they were educated at home. Parents struggled to hold down their careers at home and potentially work from home. And unfortunately, we all made a fatal mistake of letting the internet babysit our children whilst we tried to work through the pandemic. What is really clear, evidentially, that some of these influencers, and I won't use his name, but I'll say AT, so people can probably work out who I'm talking about, was the most searched man in 2022, according to Google Analytics. And he also had about 13 billion views on TikTok, which is absolutely incredible because he was never allowed an account on TikTok. And yet his reach was so powerful. And actually what you've got here are voyeuristic male manipulators that are potentially putting women into slavery, sextortion, all those kind of things, and basically running pyramid selling schemes. And that's what they do. And while young boys and men, all they see is that physical kind of personality of them with the flash cars, the big houses, cigar smoking, tripping around the world on jets and stuff like that. And actually, it's all a sham. And Lewis, through his documentary, really shows you that.
I cannot wait. Actually, I might even watch it tonight. I cannot wait to watch. There's so much about it. And those of you who have children or children around you, I suppose we've just got a responsibility to educate our children to know differently and monitor as much. I know people say they can't police, but I am the monitoring police. I hope my child's not watching this, but I am the monitoring police when it comes to phone usage. And even that, I think, I'm sure they get away with things. So even if you try and be quite vigilant, I'm not going to sit here and say, I never know they look at anything. You don't know, but you can try and at least manage those screen control and the screening and what they can see in the permissions and parental controls. I'm all about the parental controls.
I think there's a really key thing here, which is, and I would pour everybody to try and use this language, is that social media companies are not social media companies, they're anti-social media companies. The whole object of what they do is to try and drive your time on their apps, on their websites, because actually that's where they make their revenue and their content from you. And there's evidence to suggest as well that it fires the same kind of ways in the brain that substance misuse does as well. So if you're a substance addict, you're sitting there doom scrolling on TikTok, watching this kind of content, you're fulfilling a neurological want and desire to watch content consistently. And actually it does you no favors, but it makes them lots of money. And the other thing that I think is important, that we need to stop calling these people influencers and call them grimfluencers, because what they do is absolutely grim.
And I think you're being polite. Because you think, wow, it's just hate, isn't it? I'm not spreading hate. They say, hey, so it's just awful. Okay. So, like I said, I'm sure we are going to come to hopefully some sort of positive things to discuss in this session. But what's happening now is reality. This is reality. Everything we're talking about is happening in our world today. So when it comes to people in organizations and leaders, what advice would you give? Because like I said, I go to people and say, what have you done to support? What advice would you give to leaders and organizations to say, look, are you supporting your teams, or what are you doing to address all these awful things that we're going on, that we're talking about?
The first one is I'd ask them what they do around the legal duty of care of the Equalities Act 2010, because they've got a responsibility there. So that'd be the first question. Then it'd be about potentially establishing psychological safety for their staff or their learners in their environment. And then it'd be about combating the bystander effect and dealing with microaggressions. I see a significant amount of this in the workplace. Unfortunately, not within the workplace that I work at, but generally speaking, there's a huge issue with this. And I think we have to talk about bridging versus bonding as well, about the creating bridging opportunities, projects or social events that can force people to collaborate outside of their usual tribes, because we're very tribalistic as people. We tend to sit in little groups. We have our little cliques, our little circles. And actually, the contact theory shows by working towards a common goal, by changing people's perspectives and worldviews, you can really have a positive impact as well. I think if you've got media applications, like if you have your own media streams, that you should publicize positive media on there as well. And I think there are some of the very simple things that you can do very quickly in terms of that as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned Equality Act, and if certain people get in power, they'll be getting rid of it. Now, that's going to be awful for people who already face discrimination and challenge, let alone anything else if they do. So let's hope that's not going to happen. But
The Equality Act is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we have, and the disinformation and misinformation that sits around it is absolutely shocking. Equality pay rates for men and women, for example, suitable working hours, fair treatment and access to services, all of these things are there because of the Equality Act. You take that away,
we'll be in trouble.
The very foundation of civil society.
Exactly. And I think I did a little post on this the other day because people have got the wrong idea of what it is. And I think, sadly, I found that journalists weren't really probing. You could tell they're not like us. They're not from this world. So they're not asking the right questions. But what they are, again, took one thing out of the equality. Oh, it's doing this. Actually, it protects people. It's not protected. Yeah. If you're a white working class male, you're still protected if you're discriminated against. It's not removing 100%. That. But they give that thing, oh, it's only for people who are brown. No, if you're white, working class, and you feel discriminated against, you are still protected. And that protects everybody. And for those of you who don't know, the Equality Act is about providing equality of opportunity, making sure there's good relations, and eliminating all forms of discrimination, whoever it is. It's not specialist to certain people. Absolutely every single person has a right within that. And I think this is where people don't do their due diligence and research and work out what the Equality Act's about. Because like you said, if you remove that, forget people have rights when they're on pregnant and going off maternity. Forget people who just sack you because they want to sack you. People who do all manner of things. So hopefully that won't come into light. And you mentioned psychological safety, and I talk about this a lot when I talk to our clients. But what I find is that people use that term rightly, because we need to have psychological safety then, but they do not really know what it means for that organisation and what it means. So how do they make sure that there is psychological? So they'll say, oh, it's psychological safety, how do you do that? And they could sometimes have an answer. So what are they doing about allowing people to speak up? What are they doing to make sure there's fear of no repercussions if you do? What are they doing about channels of people sharing something's going on? Like you said, how are they supporting people to manage those difficult conversations, to be that upstander, to be that person who's not letting things go? And I think that's what people need to do. And again, with the Equality Act and the Employment Act that's also come in, there's even greater emphasis on addressing harassment and inappropriate behaviours from third parties. So it's not just people in the organisation. It could be a visitor, a contractor. And what people need to realise, they need to sort of get on the case with that, because if not, those figures of crimes, whether it's harassment, whether it's hate crimes, are going to go up even further, sadly.
I think you're right, Tash. And I think one of the things that I think is important is to move away from the term diversity to inclusion. We need to do that. And then obviously what we need to do is we must get our leaders to explicitly name and call out explicit acts of hostility, like recent riots or spikes in hate crime, and to signal to targeted groups that organisations are a sanctuary. We don't do that. I think the mealy-mouthed words that comes out of some of our politicians really doesn't help and actually doesn't drive things. I think the other thing that we can do as well, because I think one of the big things we need to think about as well is obviously active bystanders. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the term bystander. I prefer upstander, because you're setting a precedent, you're standing out, you're doing something different. And I think that there are the 5 Ds of intervention, which is to direct. You speak up immediately, you distract, you create a diversion to interrupt the harassment without direct confrontation. And evidence shows that if you do that in the first sort of minute, you're likely to reduce the impact of that hostile act by about 90%. And then delegate, find someone with some more authority, like a security guard in a shopping centre or someone within your community. Delay, you check in with the person after the incident as well, and you document. And please, by all means, if you're going to record it, but don't upload it to YouTube or Snapchat or anything like that. Preserve that information for the police so that they can actually prosecute the offenders if at all possible.
Yeah. And what I will say is, because I talk to a lot of people about this, it may seem, because I know most people in their life have maybe been in a situation where they're like, oh my gosh, did that just happen? Should I say something?
Yeah.
What I would say is, please find the courage to say something. Even if you say, you know what, that's not okay, you know. I mean, just do something, because when you leave it, that is then, one, are you complicit? I know it's fear, and there's lots of reasons. We both do training on this where we talk about, we know the reasons why. It could be because of who said it, because if it's at work, the seniority of somebody, it could be a whole range, we get it. But please, just I always say to people, find a few words or phrases that work for you that you can have that conversation. And I promise you, once you start to say, and you might not have realised that, but that's not really okay, and this is the reason why, or look, we really need to stop using that language. And I know you thought that, but you've actually checked the evidence for that, because sometimes we do get a lot of misinformation. So all those sort of just having those conversations, and I always say to people, once you do it once or twice, then it becomes, you become more confident in actually having that conversation. Where at first, because again, now I'd say absolutely. I imagine maybe when I was a younger person and may have thought twice, but now you're more, I think you're more mature, you find ways and words, and it is. And again, I do get it where it might be where it's happened in the workplace. I do think, look, there's no excuse. Please speak up because you've got policies, procedures to back that up. I understand it if you're out and about at night, you're in a day just, by yourself, get it. But if you're in an environment where you have got safety around you, please, because that's how it stops. That's how we learn. That's not okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also so important that I think about this from a personal perspective. How would I feel if I knew that somebody watched my daughter be verbally abused because of her ethnicity? Nobody stepped in to protect her. I would be absolutely devastated. And so would every other parent.
Yeah.
So there's a moral duty in all of us, isn't there? Because it doesn't matter who you are. If you fall over and graze your knee, the colour of blood that comes out is red. We're all humans at the end of the day. So I think there's a huge responsibility there. And actually, evidence suggests that if one person speaks up, another person will speak up. You create a domino effect of positivity that calls out that hostile act and potentially stops it straight away. And I think the other thing that is a positive, and there are some positives in 2026, is that actually young people are very comfortable doing that. Our young people's worldviews is so brilliant. We have to stand up and applaud our young people for the tolerance they show to the world they're in and their ability to stand up and call things out that they know through their education, through their lived experiences that are not appropriate for modern society. And I think our young people are always going to be our future. They're always our future. But I generally have seen such positivity out of young people. I have been taken away by some of the perspectives that I've seen from young people over the last few months.
Brilliant. That's fabulous. Fabulous. What if people say, and I don't want to go into negative, but just because I know some people might listen, they might be going, it's just free speech. It's just free speech, Mark. Can't say anything these days. Why can't I say that? What are your thoughts on free speech? And I know
but there's three kind of angles to this. There's free speech and there's harmful speech. It's one of the most difficult challenges that we face around hate crime. It's a balancing act between the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act. So, and obviously criminal justice as well. There's a lot in there. There's a harassment threshold, the legal line. If a workplace or school stops free speech from being free and becomes harmful, it creates an environment that is imitating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive. There's the incitement versus opinion kind of perspective. And then obviously there's a power dynamic kind of context as well. And then I think it's important to recognise that a lot of people think that we have free speech. That is not a UK bit of legislation. That is an amendment of American legislation that belongs in America. If you say something that's hateful, you may well be breaching a law and you may be arrested by the police for it. You have the right to opinion. But if you say something that is illegal or offensive, you may be charged for that as well. It is a minefield. It is difficult, but don't ever let the legislation stop. Go forward, ring the police, ring a reporting centre, do whatever you need to do, report that hostility or that hateful kind of content in. If nothing else, it helps local authorities know what's happening in those areas.
Definitely.
And that's why hate incident reports are so important, because local authorities are only as good as the information they know. And if they don't know that there's hate speech taking place in a bus station, for example, or in a train station, they can't put proactive measures into place to counter that. We all have a personal obligation, I feel, to report hate in. It doesn't matter what level it is, report it in. It drops that pin on the map. It helps local authorities and the police forces understand where they've got hotspot issues, where they can actually go in and do work to mitigate that. And that could be going into a school and do some work with young people. It could be going into a college. It could be going into an employer. There are many different outcomes that could all be positive.
Lovely. Thank you. And we've talked earlier about bystander training, speaking up. We've talked about they've got the Equality Act. Anything else you think that managers or HR teams could support their managers to deal with these sort of the climate we're in or any sort of cultural tensions?
I think training and awareness around psychological safety, I think, is really important. I think awareness and training around microaggressions, I think, is also I think is so important. And also, I think training and awareness around bystander interventions, being an upstander, I think those things are really important. I think we are in difficult times, and I think each and every one of us, we have a duty under the Equality Act, or the public sector equality duties, etc., to foster good relations and things like that. And we need to start living to the reality of those letters of those laws. And we haven't for a long time, and we've let things slide. And I think, for me, they're the three big ones. That's where I would focus in HR.
Yeah. And even things like sometimes we do things around cultural competence. And like you said, the microaggressions, any sort of knowledge is power, isn't it? And if you've got an understanding of, I said right at the beginning, I think, different lived experiences, that's going to help us to reduce that bias and to make sure we don't have this misunderstanding, because life is full of lovely and cultural, different people, more walks of life, and we need to understand or educate ourselves. And I always say to everybody, if I do any sort of training or discussion, there is so much information out there to educate yourself to know better. We've got this, everybody's got a podcast. We're doing this. You go on Prime if you have Prime, or even the free one, the iPlayer, Channel 4, all you need to do is put in stories about asylum seekers, LGBT, trans inclusion, race. It's there. So much as there's some misinformation out there, there's absolutely lots of really good information out there. If you're ever not sure, educate yourself, follow people on social media, but follow people with credibility rather than following people who've maybe got their own agenda.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, what we need to remember, that there are some very simple things that you can do that really have a profound and positive impact, trying to end on a high, Tash, because it's a bit doom and gloom.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I really love is something that I've only very recently come across, which is a contact effect, where actually, despite polarised headlines, the UK does remain one of the most ethnically and culturally diverse societies in history. The theory shows that people live and work and study alongside those from different backgrounds. Prejudice consistently declines. And in many local communities, the everyday integration, a shared workspace, a school run, a football pitch, is far more powerful than a social media algorithm.
Definitely. Watch those algorithm guys, people out there, watch the algorithm. Right. One had to start coming to a close-ish, but again, to end something more positive. What is your hope? What gives you hope in this climate? You deal with it on the other end, and you're trying to educate people and to understand the realities and defy those myths. What gives you hope for the future of this climate?
I think it's the resilience of communities and individuals who face hostility daily. The fact that they pick themselves up, they dust themselves down, they get on with their lives, they contribute to our NHS, to our workforces across the country. I think that gives me hope, because we're better and we're stronger together than we are by being divided apart, aren't we? And
100%.
for me, I live in a world that's diverse. That's what I want. I want diversity. And I think we're all human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think it will get better. It probably will get a little bit worse before it gets better, but I have every faith in our young people, and it will get better.
Definitely. And I heard on, I didn't watch it, but I heard on BGT, a guy did a really beautiful poem about what is Britain means to them. And I was like that. And he's literally highlighting what we just said, we're better together. And I just thought it gave me a little bit of a warm feeling in my little heart when I heard that. I was like, yeah, more of that, because we're more alike than we are different. And you think people need to recognise that. What can unite us rather than what can break us apart? Anything else? Yeah,
yes, one thing.
Go for it.
Cake, not hate. Sit down, have a cup of tea or coffee, have some cake, talk to people, learn about them, learn the different diversity, go on travels through conversation, have those kind of interactions with people, learn that the world is bigger than just you and I. Do that. Have a cup of tea, have a piece of cake, make the world a better place.
I could make a little song about that, Mark. Phil, what is that song? Make it a better place. Love it. So anything else? I know it's led to that, but I always ask my guests, is there anything you want to add that you haven't had an opportunity to say? Or
honestly, Tash, I think this is such an important subject, and I think we need to keep continuing these conversations, not just in podcasts, but in offices, in schools, in families, in communities. And like we've both said, we're stronger together. Let's be united and let's make our communities better, not just for me, for you, but for our children, our grandchildren, and everybody else that's around.
Definitely. Thank you. Before I go, we couldn't end a better place for that. That's wonderful. Please, and we're not being trite here. We're just really, it's something that all of us feel. We've been in this work for a long time, and to see the change has not been great, but there is ways forward, everyone. We can move forward from this in a positive way. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what you're training? Do you know if anybody wants to contact you, find a little bit more about you, how they can do that, how you could maybe help in any way?
Yeah, you can catch me on apitula.co.uk or on LinkedIn as Mark Wilson. They're my two favourite spots. Drop me a line and we'll see what we can do together.
Can you spell Apitula, please? Because I know people listening will be like, I spell it.
It is, just bear me 1 second because I can't remember now. You put me on the spot. It's opitulor.co.uk. There you go.
Lovely. And Mark's in it, all things around prevent hate crime. Or anything else you want to, anything, go on.
Yeah, I do all the stuff around community cohesion, hate crime, extremism, specialise in the extreme right wing, misogyny, manosphere, all that kind of stuff is my absolute cup of tea. I love it.
There you go. So Mark's your person. So if you need any information about that, or contact us at Diverse Matters, and we will share that information with Mark. So I hope you found this interesting. I couldn't let the world go by and not have this discussion. I've been meaning to get Mark on for a long time, but the thing is, but remember people, those of you listening, we appreciate it. And probably the people listening are the ones, we need some other people that may be negative to be listening as well. But if you are, please listen to what we've said. Hopefully this has enabled you to think, you know what, let me look for myself. Let me look at the evidence. Let me check the data. Let me get to know someone who's different than me and actually see if I can change my view. Okay, so Mark, thank you. Fabulous. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you.
We may get you back another time, but it's been great. And everybody else, hope you found this useful and hope you will take some of this from this. And until next time, everyone. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Keep up to date with everything Diverse Matters and everything in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Threads.